Okay, think about this for a second. Your morning coffee, maybe watering the garden later.
Yeah.
Getting water is usually just, well, turning on a tap, right? We
Yeah.
barely think about it. But for millions of people, that simple thing is a huge daily challenge, a real journey.
Absolutely.
So today we're doing a deep dive into something really fundamental, but often incredibly tough. Drinking water accessibility and, just how much water people can actually get in low and middle income countries.
Yeah, and we're unpacking a really comprehensive systematic review. This was published in the International Journal of Hygiene and Environmental Health.
Okay.
And it's not just like one study, it's an analysis pulling together findings from 20 different research papers. They started with over 6,000 records.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is. So it gives us a really broad, in-depth look at what's actually happening with water access globally.
So our mission today for you listening is to really pull out the key insights from all that research, give you a kind of shortcut to understanding this complex link between, how far water is and how much people end up using.
Exactly. And what's really interesting here, I think, is how this review tries to cut through a lot of, frankly, inconsistent data
Right.
to give us a clearer picture of something that genuinely impacts health, time, daily life for millions.
Okay, let's unpack that. The review really hammers home that getting more water, the quantity, is critical.
Hmm.
Why is that so vital? Beyond just, the obvious need to drink.
Well, it strongly highlights that having more water available, not just for drinking, but also for hygiene, is seen as one of the most efficient ways to cut down the risk of water-related infectious diseases.
Okay, like what specifically?
We're talking about a direct link to better public health, reducing things like diarrheal diseases, which are waterborne, and also water-washed diseases like trachoma and scabies.
Right, right. And here's where it gets, I think, really interesting. It's not just about health, is it?
Yeah.
There's this whole other layer of time and opportunity.
Exactly. That's a huge piece of it. When water isn't right there on the premises, someone has to go get it. And the review confirms it's overwhelmingly women and children who carry this burden.
Mm-hmm.
And this often happens at the direct expense of other really important things like schooling or productive work, whether that's farming, other jobs, even household chores, or just basic personal hygiene.
And it's physical too, right?
Yeah.
Carrying those heavy loads.
Absolutely. That burden isn't just lost time.
No.
Carrying heavy water containers day after day exposes them to physical health problems, chronic musculoskeletal issues, things like that. It's a serious threat to water security, but also just to human development.
So the big picture here is fetching water isn't just an inconvenience. It's a systemic drain, especially on women and girls. It holds back education, economic stability, health. It's much more than just logistics.
Precisely.
Okay, so given how important access is, the review focuses a lot on accessibility. How do they actually, measure that in these studies?
Generally, it's measured in a couple of main ways, either physical distance and, meters or kilometers to the water source, or the time it takes to get there and back, usually in minutes or hours. Some studies also use broader categories, like classifying households as having no access, basic access, or maybe optimal access.
I've heard this term, the water plateau.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like it describes a specific pattern of water use related to distance.
Mm-hmm.
What is that exactly? And more importantly, does this big review actually confirm it?
Yeah, the water plateau idea, it basically suggests the relationship isn't linear.
Okay.
The idea is you see a really steep drop in how much water people collect when they go from having it on site to even just, say, 3 to 5 minutes away.
Right.
Then supposedly the amount collected kind of levels off, that's the plateau, until you get to maybe 30 minutes collection time where you'd expect another drop.
But does the evidence hold up?
Well, that's the thing. The systematic review found that relationship is still pretty uncertain and unconfirmed, especially when you look at urban areas. And it seems to be mostly because the findings across different studies are inconsistent and they use different methods to measure things.
That water plateau concept is interesting.
Right.
But, well, if we can't even consistently measure the inputs, like distance and time reliably, how solid can those patterns really be? How
Right.
good are the measurements for access?
That's a really critical question, and the review points out that most of the studies relied on self-reporting, people telling the researchers how far it is or how long it takes.
Which can be tricky.
Exactly. It's very prone to recall bias, remembering accurately. One study, for instance, actually found self-reported time was unreliable, especially from older or illiterate participants. They ended up preferring distance as the metric.
Oh, interesting.
And very few studies actually went the extra step to compare self-reports with more direct measures, like using GPS tracking or direct observation.
Yeah.
So this inconsistency in measurement is a really significant problem when you try to compare studies or rely on the overall data.
Okay, so that's measuring accessibility. What about the other side of the equation, the actual quantity of water? How do studies track that?
The review points to two main ways quantity is measured. There's water collected, basically, how much water is brought into the home.
Got it.
And then there's water consumed, which tries to measure how much is actually used.
Yeah.
These are usually reported in liters per person per day. That's LPCD, or sometimes liters per household per day.
LPCD.
Yeah, LPCD or LTPHD. Some studies even just counted the number of containers collected. And again, the terminology itself wasn't always consistent across the studies, which, as you said, complicates trying to compare findings.
So, okay, we have all these different measurement approaches, some with issues.
Yeah.
But overall, what did the review find? Is there a direct link between how accessible water is and how much people use?
Well, they looked at 11 studies that directly tackled that question, and 7 of them did find a clear inverse relationship. Meaning, as the distance or the time to get water went up, the quantity of water people had or used went down.
Okay, that makes intuitive sense.
Yeah. For example, there was a study in Bangladesh that showed a really significant drop. Average water use went from about 56 liters per person per day if the source was super close, like under 25 meters.
Wow, 56.
Down to just 31 liters if the source was over 100 meters away. And other studies, like in Zimbabwe and South Africa, that used GPS to measure distance more accurately, also found that quantity went down as distance went up.
But you said only 7 out of 11 found that. What about the other 4? That suggests it's not always a simple further away equals less water situation. What else is going on?
Exactly. It's more nuanced. And what's really interesting is that for those 4 studies that found no significant link, there were often pretty clear reasons why.
Like what?
Well, for instance, some were done in places where people already had reasonably good access. Maybe the source was already within, say, 1.5 kilometers or a 30-minute round trip.
So improving it slightly didn't change much.
Right. A small improvement, maybe shaving off just 3 minutes, didn't really move the needle on how much water they used. Other studies noted that people were already using other water sources anyway, like maybe their own wells they'd dug.
Okay.
So putting in a new improved source didn't necessarily change their total water usage much. It really suggests the strength of this relationship is, well, context dependent. It gets weaker if access is already relatively okay.
That makes sense. It depends on the starting point.
Right. And building on that, it's also important to look at what happens when there are actual interventions projects to improve water services. 6 studies looked at this specifically.
And what did they find? Did the improvements work?
Well, yes and no. All 6 found the interventions did successfully reduce the distance or time needed to get water. That's good.
Okay.
But interestingly, not all of them led to a significant increase in the quantity of water people collected or used.
Really? Why not? If it's easier to get, wouldn't you just get more?
Yeah.
It seems counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it? The review suggests there might be a kind of trade-off happening.
A trade-off.
Yeah. So in some cases, people used the time they saved not necessarily to haul more water from that single new source, but maybe to collect more containers overall, potentially from different places. Or they started using multiple sources more regularly.
Okay.
For example, one study in Benin found that after an intervention, people collected more containers, yes, but many households started using both the new improved source and their old unimproved source.
So they're getting more water total, but maybe mixing sources.
Exactly. Getting more water overall, which is good, but maybe using different water for different things, perhaps lower quality water for washing and the better source for drinking.
So using multiple sources is a common strategy then. Does that significantly boost their overall water availability?
Absolutely. The review found that's quite common. Households often use other, maybe closer sources for things like bathing or laundry, saving the better or further sorts for drinking. Yeah, it increases the total amount of water available for hygiene, which, as we said, can reduce risks for diseases like trachoma. And it's interesting, the review notes that when water is really scarce, cleaning is often the first thing to go.
Yeah.
But if the quantity increases, a lot of that extra water gets quickly dedicated to bathing and washing clothes. It's a high priority.
What about the type of water source? Does a protected well make a difference compared to, say, an open source? Or even just household size?
Both seem to play a role, yeah, though the findings aren't always perfectly consistent. One study in Nicaragua did find that protected wells provided significantly more water per person than unimproved sources did.
Okay.
But other studies had mixed results or found that sometimes people just prioritized whatever source was closest, even if the quality wasn't perceived as being as good.
Convenience versus quality.
Sometimes, yeah. And as for household size, several studies found this kind of inverse association.
Meaning bigger families use less per person.
Exactly. The larger the household, the lower the amount of water collected or used per capita. It suggests there might be constraints in larger families, maybe limitations on how much can be carried or stored per person.
If we zoom out a bit, what about bigger environmental factors,
Mhm.
like rainy season versus dry season, or where people live rural versus urban? Does the review touch on that?
It does, and it highlights some gaps. Many studies didn't actually specify if they collected data in the wet or dry season, but we know seasonality is a huge factor. It affects both how much water is available and its quality.
Right.
And most studies tend to be done in the dry season just for practical reasons, which could skew global estimates,
That makes sense. Easier logistically, but maybe not representative.
potentially. And another big point, almost all the studies in this review were done in rural settings. The relationship between access and quantity is really quite underexplored in urban and peri-urban areas.
Which is critical, with cities growing so fast.
Exactly. Rapid urbanization is putting huge pressure on water access in those areas, so we really need more research there.
Okay, so after digging through all of this, all these studies, what's the sort of final takeaway message from this deep dive?
Well, the big picture finding is that how much water households have is likely a function of the time or distance needed to collect it, at least in rural areas.
Okay.
And the good news is that interventions to improve access do generally succeed in cutting down that collection time and distance. But the exact strength of that relationship, how much quantity changes for a given change in access, is still pretty unclear. And that's mainly because of all those inconsistencies we talked about in how studies are designed and how they measure things.
Which sounds like a pretty strong call for better research methods, especially if we want to track progress effectively. What does the review suggest on that front?
It definitely makes a strong case for that. It really advocates for using appropriate and comprehensive indicators and methods when we assess water access.
More than just asking people how long it takes.
Yes. It highlights a critical need for more direct measurements, things like GPS tracking rather than relying so heavily on self-reports, mainly to reduce that recall bias problem.
Got it.
And it also stresses the need for more research into those underexplored areas, the impact of seasonality, what's happening in urban settings, and even looking at things like topography, the landscape itself, which most studies didn't really factor in.
So bringing this back to you, our listener,
Mhm.
when you absorb all these intricate details, what's the real relevance here? Why does this matter?
Well, I think this deep dive really shows just how complex something seemingly simple like getting water actually is.
Yeah.
It shows that even when we improve access, the actual amount of water people use for essential things like hygiene and drinking,
Right.
it's complicated. It's influenced by everything from, how they transport it to how big their family is, even what time of year it is.
Right.
And understanding those dynamics is absolutely crucial if we want to design interventions that actually work, interventions that genuinely reduce the burden of fetching water and help prevent all those water-related diseases globally.
It really does make you think, doesn't it? All these interconnected factors behind something so basic. It's clearly not just about installing a pump or turning on a tap. It's this whole ecosystem of challenges and potential solutions.
Indeed. And the review really concludes powerfully on that note. It says that understanding and improving water security, including its reliability through the seasons, is absolutely crucial if we're going to meet the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically SDG Target 6.
Which is?
That's the goal for universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water for all by 2030.
A huge goal. So for you listening today, maybe the final thought to leave you with is this.
When you think about these big global challenges, consider this question. How might the very way we measure things, the methods themselves, become part of the problem or part of the solution? Especially when the reliability of our data directly impacts where help goes, where interventions are focused. Think about how the way we gather information can fundamentally shape the lives of millions.